everyone, and welcome to today's live learning event, The Art of AI Product Development, Delivering Business Value. I'm Ross Ayosa, founder of Product Management Advisor, and I'll be your host for today's learning event. Thank you for being here, and we're thrilled to have you with us. A few bits of housekeeping before we begin. The chat feature is available for entering your questions, so please do so at any time. We reserve some time for later in the session for your Q&A. The session is being recorded, so you'll have the ability to revisit the highlights later on. And we are also joined today by Tativ, my colleague and PMA's head of marketing. She'll be monitoring the chat and is available if you run into any technical difficulties. So please reach out to Tativ if necessary. All right, let's get started. I'd like to introduce our special guest today, Dr. Jana Lipinkova. Jana is an AI advisor, entrepreneur, and author of The Art of AI Product Development. She has a PhD in natural language processing and has led AI projects for global companies like Lufthansa, BMW, and Volkswagen. She also founded her own AI and analytics business and now helps organizations apply AI with clarity and impact. So Jana, it's such a pleasure to have you with us. Before we dive in, would you like to take a minute to introduce yourself in your own words?
Sorry, I just saw I was muted. Thanks a lot for the introduction, Ross. So for sure, so basically, my background, actually my very far background is in Chinese studies. So I was very fascinated by languages at the beginning of my studies. And that's why Chinese was kind of my fifth language that I studied at the university. And after that, I moved pretty quickly into computational linguistics and machine translation, because I was always interested in kind of automating language tasks and how to work with languages. So just a technical question maybe. So are we actually joined by other participants? No.
We do have participants on the line.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, and then in 2015, I finished my PhD, which was in computational linguistics. And as you can imagine, computational linguistics and natural language processing at that time, so 10 years ago, it looked very differently from what it is now. But nevertheless, it was a very exciting time, because that was kind of the transition that we had from very simple machine learning, so shallow learning, and also a lot of rules and ontologies and all this manual stuff, into deep learning, right? So deep learning came up in natural language processing in 2013, 2015. And yeah, and since then I have been working in different kinds of industry projects, so also acquired different AI projects myself, mostly with bigger companies, so with big corporates. And we are also, so at my companies, we are also working on our own products that we offer as platforms to the companies. But still it's in the B2B environment, right? So there is always some kind of customization to be done, some context of the companies that needs to be included and integrated in the products and so on. So that's why, yeah, I think it's a very dynamic field, but I think it's also very challenging, especially, from this B2B perspective, because it's much more risky for the companies to use AI, right? If AI makes a mistake in B2B, it's very different from B2C. And then big companies, they normally come with such a big history and so much baggage of, politics and strategy and so on, which is sometimes a bit challenging for AI to learn. But that's something that I'm really fascinated about.
So let's move on. So what's in store for us today? First, we'll explore key insights from your book, from your new book, the theme, which is the theme of today's session. We'll take a note that we'll be sharing a couple of promotions created just for this session, so don't miss it. Stay tuned for that. Next, we'll unpack Dana's AI Strategy Playbook, a set of practical mental models for product leaders. And we'll also be discussing how AI intersects with product management. And finally, like always, we'll close with some career advice and takeaways. Okay, so without further ado, we will jump into it. And the book, The Art of AI Product Development. Jana, your book is called The Art of AI Product Development for a reason. So let's start there. What does that phrase mean to you? And why did you feel it was important to write this book?
So I think that since the launch of ChatGPT in 2022, right, basically we have seen a lot of companies who jumped on AI like it was the new hype and the new hot thing, right? And companies that didn't really have like the tech background or the AI background to implement the projects that they were aiming for. And of course, so that's also a time when I was like, asked for a lot of support and help in this kind of AI projects. And then I saw over and over again that companies were kind of, making, let's say, the same mistakes or running into the same pitfalls. So I just thought that, okay, having so much experience, especially also like implementing AI in non-tech companies, it would be good to summarize all the lessons that we learned and all the methodologies that we had used in a book, right? And then just to make it available to companies, to developers, to product managers, and so on. I guess that was the motivation, and I'm someone who really likes writing, and I also like structuring my own experience. So for me, basically writing is a way to structure and to kind of surface all the lessons that I learned. So that came together and I really enjoyed the process. Of course, it took more time than expected, even with the help of AI, but still I'm really glad that I went down this path, right? Because it's a commitment, right? If you want to write a book, especially if you're working with a publisher, then you need to finish it in a certain time frame. I'm also someone who is like very kind of self-demanding in terms of the quality. So I'm more on the perfectionist side. So yeah, but still very glad that I took this decision.
What would you tell our audience? What makes AI product development different from traditional product development? How would you explain that difference?
So I think there are two sides to this. There is the product side, right? Like roughly speaking, the product side, and then you have this whole people and organizational side. So on the product side, one thing is clear, AI introduces uncertainty and it introduces this kind of probabilistic behavior, right? So when users sit there in front of an AI feature, whether it's a chatbot or maybe it's even just a classification or a recommendation, you're not certain about the outcomes that you will get given a certain input, right? So that's one thing. And then the other thing that is certain actually is that sometimes the AI will be making mistakes, right? And for some use cases, for some people, and for some contexts, that can really be a showstopper. So I think that that's the big difference, like the fundamental difference. Because of course, in traditional software products, they're more on the deterministic side, right? So it's all about, you have all those squares and the buttons and the drop downs in your user interface. And then when you interact with it, then you can be pretty much certain about what's happening, right? As long as there are no bugs or no unintended behaviors, of course. And that's also maybe, the second difference is that, in traditional products, the interface defines your interactions and it defines all the information and the data that you can get from the product. In AI, especially when we talk about those chat and conversational experiences, which are the mainstream at the moment, then a lot of the capabilities and of the functionality and of the knowledge and the data of the product is actually under-specified, right? So it's kind of hidden in the model. And then, so if you use one model today and then you just change it to another model tomorrow, then the interface stays the same, but the behavior can be completely different. And I think it's, so at the moment, I think many providers of these like chatbots and conversational systems, they kind of place this burden of understanding the model and its behavior on the user. In my view, it's also something that's a very important task for the interaction designers, the UX designers, and so on, because ultimately, if the user can't align with the model, and many users today, they are just beginners with AI, right? So if there is no alignment, then they will just jump off. And that's also something that we see often with those B2C AI products, right? That at the beginning, there is a spike in usage and it's very popular and it looks great and so on. But then users can't actually get sustainable value from the product over time. So they just jump off. Yeah. So that's on the product side. And then on the organizational and the people side, so looking at it like from the perspective of a team or a company, I think it's not specific to AI, it's more specific to all new big emerging technologies that companies need to learn about it, right? So now we are kind of all at the beginning, right? And teams are learning, and they're also learning that, okay, now maybe the roles of PMs, of designers, of the developers, they're shifting, the interactions are different, the dynamics is different. But you really need to take this into account and to start with some simple things, right? And then also plan for this learning journey over time.
Okay, and you write about the importance of data readiness. Why is data readiness such a critical first step?
So, well, I mean, data, it's let's say it's the fuel, it's the raw material for any AI system. So that's kind of a given, right? But then on the other hand, we often see that companies jump straight into into selecting the best model, or maybe fine-tuning the model, or building the best AI architecture, like an agent architecture or whatever, right? Without actually having the right data and also data in a sufficient quality at hand, right? So there are multiple dimensions to data quality. You can look on the accuracy of the data, the completeness, the consistency, and so on. Some of them are a bit more gradual, right? So like, if you have a lot of data and there are some missing values, then over a time you can improve, you can complete the data, you can clean it and so on. But some of these issues, they can also be very like hard showstoppers, and then you will find out about it when you're actually already in the middle of your project, right? So maybe just to give you an example, because that's the holy grail in the finance industry, right? So how to predict stock prices, for example, right? Or how to predict how certain things that happen in the world will affect the stock prices of the companies. So there is this very fundamental school of just doing it based on the charts and on the time series on the historical time series of the stock prices, which is obviously not enough, right? It just doesn't work. Then the second step is to integrate the fundamental data of a company, right? So you can look at the industry, you can look at the revenue, the profits, and so on. So all those financial numbers, and then try to make some predictions based on that. But that also works only to a very, let's say, just to a small degree, right? So what you need in terms of data is actually all the data about what's happening in the market in which this company is moving. So that can be about regulations, it can be about the competitors, it can be about technological innovations, about some geopolitical dynamics and so on, right? And yeah, I mean, I've seen people ruin themselves trying to work out this use case of predicting stock prices, but without actually realizing that, okay, we can't codify explicitly all the information that we actually need to solve it successfully, right? So really, I think for the data, it's important to understand what are your dimensions of quality, right? And then to really be very honest about, okay, we might have a hard showstopper here, so until we solved it, we will not attack this use case.
That makes sense. And because our audience is comprised of mostly product management professionals, what would you say are some common misconceptions that product managers have when they first approach AI product development?
Well, I think that one of the universal pitfalls, and actually I'm always surprised to see it happening, right? But then on the other hand, in some ways, it also makes sense, right? It's this doing AI for the sake of AI, right? So just doing AI because it's popular, it's the hype, because you don't want to stay behind your competitors, because leadership demands it or investors demand it, and so on. It can work out in many cases, right? Because AI is so broad. So from my perspective, I really believe that in any company that's somehow digitally active, there is some potential for AI, right? But you really need to be super careful in going this path from just saying, okay, we want to do AI now, to defining, to selecting, and then defining and specifying a concrete use case. So I guess that's probably kind of the biggest issue that we also see then landing in the products, right? And then users are just there. They have some big product that they're used to, they have been using it, right? And now suddenly there is an AI feature on top of it. So it's not, oftentimes it's not perceived as very valuable. And then, yeah, and I think that generally for product managers, so sometimes, I see PMs who say that, okay, I'm not a techie, so I don't want to get into this stuff, right? And I think that's the wrong attitude for AI. So in general, I believe that with AI, everyone on the team, including the designers, the PM, and so on, and even the business stakeholders, they need to have an understanding of how AI works, right? Just because of this, also this fact that I mentioned at the beginning, that a lot of your product's capabilities, they will be hidden in the backend, right? They will be hidden in the model, in the architecture. They will not be very explicit in the user interface. So I really believe that it's a PM's job to also understand how a model will behave, what kinds of tasks it can do, what kind of knowledge it has, right? And for that, it's important to understand what was the data that went into it, what was the training process, right? So what's the training objective and so on. And that's why also in the book, actually, like 1/3 of the book, formally it's 1/3, so it's one part of the book, but I think in terms of number of pages, it's a bit more, is really focused on these technological basics and how they apply to products.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the time. I want to try and keep us on pace here. These are powerful lessons, and there's a lot more to learn inside the book. but I do want to move on to your playbook. I want to get to that next. But before we go there, I just want to tell everyone that your book does dive much deeper into these themes, and we are going to share special promotion discount codes, things like that for attendees a little later on. So be sure to stay tuned in for that. Now, I'd like to expand the conversation into the frameworks that you've developed for making AI strategy practical. And so alongside your book, you've also created AI Strategy Playbook, which, by the way, is available on your website, if I'm not mistaken. Let's talk about this, Jana, and why did you feel leaders needed this additional resource?
So yeah, I can actually quickly share my screen and show the playbook.
Let me stop sharing.
So you should be able to see it, right?
I see it, yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so just quickly to explain what the strategy playbook actually is. It's a collection of mental models. So at the moment we have 11 of them, right? So you can see them here, and then for each of them you can just click on it, and then you will see the details. So normally there is a visual representation, and in most cases these visuals, they can also kind of be reused or reconverted into templates for your own purposes. And then you have some explanation. So what's the mental model? What's the purpose? How to use it? What are some anti-patterns? Also examples and so on. And it's structured along 3+1 topic, just like the book actually, right? So there is discovery, because that's, I think it's like, especially for PMs, it's a core competence when it comes to AI, is really to learn how can we do both technical, but then also user-facing discovery for AI products. Then there is, of course, development and integration. So adoption and integration is also another big area that we see in companies. So to put it very simply, even if you build the best AI system, but then people don't use it because they don't trust it or they feel unsure about how to use it and so on, then you haven't created any value, right? So that's some like a core insight that we also had during our practice. And that's why, this kind of user education, the interface design and so on, it's super important in the company context, but also in the product context. And then we are also slowly introducing some models that are kind of related to the overarching AI strategy in the company. So for example, how to implement multiple use cases so they work well together. You have some learning effects, you have spillover effects, and so on. So why we developed it? Well, one thing is that it's kind of a distillation of the core insights from the book, because obviously when you talk, for example, to the management of a company, to the executives, then I will not expect from them that they will read the book, right? But still I can point them to the strategy playbook and tell them, okay, here are the mental models and the frameworks that are relevant to you for your current project, for your current challenges, and so on. So I think that was just, like kind of condenses the core lessons from the book. And also important, we haven't done this visually or structurally now, but some of these mental models, so for example, this AI opportunity tree, then the AI system blueprint, actually, and the solution space map, they are relevant and applicable to pretty much every AI project, right? So they're kind of universal. And then some of them, they're a bit more specific to the stage in which you're in, right? So for example, this topic of how to explain an AI system and how to provide transparency into an AI system. So that's clearly an adoption topic, right? And once you face it, so you will see it from the user feedback very clearly, because when you just sit in user tests or customer meetings, then customer will ask you, okay, how was this data? How did this data actually come about? was it actually generated by an AI or by a human? Of course, you know it was AI, but then you also need to explain on top, okay, it was a Gen AI model, it has this and this accuracy and so on, right? So that's just to the point that some of these models, you know, when you go through them, I think it becomes very clear that some of them, they are more specific to certain contexts, certain stages in projects and so on.
Yeah, these models are great. So you know, you do talk about, you know, using these mental models for, you know, different strategies. Which model can you share one that you think every product leader should adopt? Is there like a general model that, you know, if I'm a product leader and, you know, I want to come check this out, like which is the one that I should gravitate to first?
Well, difficult to choose one. I would say actually these two, right? So the AI opportunity tree, we use it to counteract that issue of doing AI for the sake of AI. Let me just explain it quickly, right? So what we see happening quite often is that especially with, you know, when you're building a new product and you know that you want to build it around AI, then it's a bit easier, normally not easier, right? But you don't have as much to lose as when you're trying to add AI on top of an existing product, right? Because you can pivot, you can break things, then, and you have a different degree of flexibility and normally also enthusiasm, right? But then on the other hand, what we often see with existing products is that, you know, the PM or the manager or the investor will just come and say, okay, let's now use AI. Yeah, let's just now put some AI into this product, right? It's actually funny because I had really a very interesting insight this week. So I was teaching a class for finance people about AI for finance people, right? So how finance people, accountants, controllers, and so on, how they can use AI in their work life, right? So like basic. And then we had a conversation about, because most of them, they're using Microsoft and Microsoft Office or 365. And one participant said, yeah, you know, like 20 years ago, Microsoft had 𝐏𝐫𝐸. I think some of the participants might know what 𝐏𝐿𝐵 is, right? It was kind of a paper clip in Microsoft Office that would travel around the
Yes,
OS. Yeah, Ross, I think so.
I
And
remember. Yeah.
yeah. And would suggest help, right? So would suggest help planning your finances, writing your letters, and so on. And the problem was that it was like critically over-promising. So it was not delivering on its promises, right? And that's why it was phased out very quickly, very soon, right? But that was kind of the early stage AI by Microsoft. And that was expected by me. And actually, I also use 𝐏𝐿𝐵 like as a metaphor often in my presentations. But then this guy actually said, yeah, you know, 20 years ago or 25 years ago, there was 𝐏𝐿𝐵, and now there is Copilot in Microsoft. And to me, it feels the same. Right, so it's the same kind of not very useful and sometimes a bit annoying thing that just pops up in the product, right? And the user doesn't know how to use it in a way that brings value and that feels good and so on. And of course, I wanted to rebel. I wanted to say, okay, but come on, AI now, the AI that we have behind Copilot is completely different. It's thousands of times more powerful than what was there with 𝐏𝐿𝐵. But that was the kind of very hard user perspective, right? It was kind of the same feeling that they had about it. Yeah. That was just an anecdote, right? Let me come back to this AI opportunity tree. So basically the approach that we take to counteract this phenomenon of just adding AI everywhere is to work around the inherent benefits of the technology. And the good thing is that they're actually pretty clear and pretty well defined, right? So this is, we have 4+1 branches in this AI opportunity tree, right? So one benefit is basically that you can automate existing processes, existing tasks, and then you can become just more efficient, more productive by doing it, right? Then you can also improve certain processes. So for example, if you want to create content with AI, right, then AI can maybe provide some new ideas, it can polish your draft and so on. Then we have innovation, right? So that's when you really already try to create new products or services around AI. So you're kind of pivoting into this AI first direction. And of course, personalization. So basically customizing your user experiences, outputs, and so on to like to an audience of one user or maybe one department, one team, and so on in the B2B context, right? And then we also have a bunch of those secondary benefits. So that can be like convenience, certain user experiences can be streamlined, can be some emotional benefits and so on. But these are super individual. They're more applicable in B2C context. So I haven't seen them like as a primary benefit around which to build a core value proposition so far, right? And then what we normally recommend to our customers and to our clients is, of course, to start on the left of this tree. So with automation and productivity, right? Because these are the low-hanging fruits. The benefits are very clear, and technically they're often also simpler and easier to implement than the other branches. And then, as said at the beginning, every organization is learning about AI, right? So as you're learning, you're gaining experience, you're getting more buy-in, then you can also move more to the right, to those more advanced, more difficult, but then sometimes also more valuable opportunities, right? I think that's a great starting point for teams to just try to brainstorm. There are some examples here also. So this one is for financial services. Just, to structure your opportunity landscape, also to see that, okay, I don't need to build a chatbot now, right? Because there are actually so many opportunities around your business or product that you can take, right? So it kind of creates this grounding structure and also confidence that, okay, it doesn't need to be like the 10th chatbot in our industry now, right? You can also do something that might make more sense for your business.
Yeah, no, I love this. I love the concept. So this is great. It's such practical framework for direction, strategy, decision making. So I would encourage everyone to visit Jana's website to check it out. What I'd like to do next, Jana, is maybe take back the screen. I want to connect this and what we've talked about so far. All the lessons that are in your book and your playbook as well, and connect that to the audience's day-to-day reality as a product manager. Like, so how does it all relate? Let's see if I can get this up here. So, we're talking about bridging, bridging AI with product management. One of the big questions for many product managers is how do we bridge the gap between, being an AI specialist and or AI specialist in general and product teams? Like, what should product managers, go into, their product planning, and what should they know about, working with AI data scientists and AI engineers to help them, better, grasp the concept and be successful engaging and introducing AI into their products.
Okay, yeah, so good question about the more specific skill set, right? So I think that one thing I already said it before, it's really important to understand the technology, right? So this attitude, I'm not the techie here, right? I don't think it will work with AI, right? Because indeed, Ross, as you say, right, you need to have this very close collaboration and communication with AI engineers, with ML engineers, data scientists, data engineers, and so on, right? So there is a bunch of new roles that are also actually created around AI now. And I think that this kind of cross-functional collaboration, it has to be much tighter in the context of AI, right? So on the one hand, because, kind of the model can be half of your product, right? And then you really need to understand what the model is. And then the other thing is also that that sometimes, PMs, obviously, they need to be very good at this interface, right, between the business and the users and then the technology. And we say, there is so much vagueness. I feel like today we also have so much hype around it that, there's all those buzzwords and so on. And then actually, when you go and ask people, okay, what's an agent, right? Or what's a knowledge graph? Then oftentimes people who talk about it in their team, in their meetings and so on, they will not really be able to define it, right? And then you go into a team and then you ask what's an agent behind closed doors, right? You ask the PM, the engineer, and then the designer, and each of them has a different answer, right? And then it's, I don't think it's possible to build successfully in that way, right? So that's why, this kind of knowledge, of the technical knowledge, I think it's really crucial for the PMs, but also all the other team members. And then the other big trend, of course, that we see is that with AI, PMs can now also get much more hands-on, right? So they can, of course, engineer prompts, play around with different prompts, right? And in many cases, an AI feature, when you reduce it, it's actually a prompt, right? Or even an agent, it can just be a prompt, right? So that's, I think, something that brings PMs much closer to this whole development stack and the development process. And of course, also now with vibe coding, we have all those amazing tools to prototype, to build demos and so on. But it's all good to a certain degree, right? Because, it's sometimes I see PMs who are so fed up of all this cross-functional team dynamics and so on that they just say, okay, now I will just build it myself, right? And often that doesn't also work because they don't have this kind of engineering mindset and the whole engineering, let's say, DNA to build a proper product, right? So it's all good to a certain degree. And and also often very individual and depending on the team, of course. If you have a full staffed team where every component of your data and AI pipeline, has some assigned role, that's a role that's assigned to it, then it's a different situation than when you're a startup and then you have a PM, half a designer and half a developer for everything. Then, of course, people need to be much more cross-functional.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of so the the PMA community, there's discussions going on, and it's almost 100% around AI. I mean, it just dominates the points and the discussions and the questions that people are asking, and one of the issues I guess I hear a lot is ensuring that an AI initiative actually connects to business value. So I'm seeing that question a lot too. I don't know if that's something that you could talk to, how PMs can ensure that AI initiative does connect to a business value.
Well, I think that that's something that's where the AI opportunity tree can help a lot, right? Because if you select an initiative that targets automation, that targets productivity, that targets improvement of an existing process, or innovation and pivoting to a new business model, then I think it's pretty easy to focus on those initiatives that bring business value, and it also becomes easier to argue for them, right? Because the benefits are quite clear. So and then the other thing is also, how do you actually, obviously, how do you quantify business value, right? That's not always so obvious. So in AI, of course, we have this tradition of the technical KPIs and mathematical KPIs, like we have accuracy, precision, recall, and so on. But these metrics, they don't convert into value for the users or value for the business, right? So I really think that here it's important to understand, okay, what are the user-facing metrics? So it can be things like maybe helpfulness or how informative a response was to a user, right? So if you have an LLM, it can bring two responses, right? They can both be correct. They can even have the same length, right? But the degree of helpfulness and usefulness to the user, it can be drastically different, right? So I think that it's super important to define those metrics, and often they're also quite custom to specific applications. And then, of course, also in the end, you want to be able to measure and to quantify the value for the business. If it's something like, you're saving time or cost, right? So let's say we are now in the B2B setting, right? And then you're building a system that's saving the workers and the employees time and cost, then it's quite easy to quantify, right? But then if it's something that's more innovative and has some more like tangible, less tangible benefits, then of course it can also be harder to quantify. That's why our advice is always start with those automation productivity use cases, quantify the value of AI, and then you can just stretch it, right? You can say, okay, AI has brought us value here. Now AI will bring us value with something that's much less tangible, probably also more difficult, and so on, right? So that's kind of the argument or the trick that we sometimes use there.
It's a great perspective. So let's bring it close to home. Let's continue moving forward with some career advice. So Jana, you've built an impressive career across academia, industry, entrepreneurship. And many of our audience members are thinking about their own next steps in product management and AI, right? Because I think you got to think about both. So let me ask for our members and for our guest, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out in product management and who wants to break into AI, or maybe they're an experienced product manager? How can they adapt their skill sets to thrive in an AI-driven product environment, product development environment?
I'll try to answer the question. I think it's not so like you can answer it at many different levels. Obviously, for myself, I'm not really like a corporate career person, right? So I've always focused on doing the things that I enjoy doing and then making some money with them. But I think that now, especially as we have all those headlines like product management is dead, or in 10 years we will not need any developers anymore, and so on, right? So there is this clear wave of fear of job replacement, job displacement, and some jobs just disappearing, right? So that's one thing which I think kind of everyone is thinking about. And then the other thing, like how as a PM who maybe doesn't have an AI background and so on, right? So how to move into this field, because clearly it is the future, right? There are a lot of challenges, but still in the long term, that will be the future, and that will be this long-term transformation that's happening. And you cannot say, okay, I will not do it because, it's just happening, right? It's even if you want to resist it, but it's probably not such a smart choice. So I think that in general, from my perspective, it's really super important to focus on those uniquely human things in yourself, right? And especially looking at all those creative skills, at things like taste, right? So seeing the nuances in the product and so on, and also finding your own niche, right? Because if you say that, okay, I want to develop taste, then normally you will do it in a certain area, right? So you will look at all the products of the competitors, at all the products in the specific niche and so on. And then you will gain this kind of understanding and feeling for nuance, for what things work better, for what kind of alignment and affinity the users also have for these products, right? And then slowly over time, you can actually figure out how to improve things and really make a difference. Because I think that now, in the past years, product management has often, it kind of has become a more mechanic activity, right? Because there are all those KPIs and frameworks, and people just think that, okay, I will learn a couple of frameworks, right? And then I will focus on improving some KPIs and some, usage data and so on. And then that's it. But these are actually the things, so applying frameworks, and then optimizing some quantitative KPIs. These are exactly the things that will eventually be automated with AI, right? But selecting the right frameworks, selecting the right KPIs, right, and doing all those things, all this kind of oiling in between, right, and adding the nuance that you need to actually get users on board, to make your product stick and so on. I think that has a deeply human component, right? And that's also something that will eventually allow you to differentiate yourself against competitors, right? Because your competitors, eventually they will have the same AI technologies, the same tools and so on available to them, right? So the question is really in how you as a human can make the difference given these technological possibilities.
Always comes back to human. It's very important.
Definitely. I think that AI, so at the moment, it's so much about the humans, about the psychology, about organizational psychology, about things like building trust and so on. I think it's much more about this, especially from the PM perspective, than, about using the coolest model or the newest agent framework.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for that. Let's just, I want to touch on your book again. So before we go into the Q&A, I want to take a quick moment to highlight Jana's book, The Art of AI Product Development. So for today's attendees, and for those who registered, we've arranged exclusive discounts, 25% off print copy with the code, 25% off the ebook for participants here today. The book is full of practical insights from data readiness to strategy and frameworks. Dr. Jana took you on a little tour of her playbook with the mental models. A lot of important and critical and helpful tools available to you. So don't miss this chance to grab your copy today, the printed book or the ebook, and unlock ideas that you can start applying right away. So let's move on. And if anybody has any questions about, getting the printed book or the ebook, feel free to reach out to Dr. Jana or myself. All right. So let's turn it over to the audience. Thank you for submitting your questions. Tativ has been monitoring the chat, so I don't know, Tativ, do you have any questions? I think Doing a time check, we probably only have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions.
So hi.
Is something available?
Yeah, sure. So the event was live streaming on LinkedIn, and we have comments there. So I will go ahead and read the submitted questions. So Nara is asking for PMs already managing software products. What are some signs that an AI initiative is actually worth pursuing versus just being hype driven?
Well, I guess the answer is quite clear, except there is some additional background to the question. I think it's usage, right? So, and especially usage that kind of persists across, right? So basically stickiness of the product. So if you have users that are coming back to the product regularly, then normally it means that they see value in the product. Otherwise, they wouldn't spend time in the product. So I think that that's kind of the most universal signs that an initiative is succeeding.
Okay. Great, thank you for the answer. And we have time, so I will read another comment from Rafael. He is asking, how should senior product leaders think about building a roadmap for AI? Is it better to start with smaller, quick wins or focus on long-term foundational bets?
Thanks. Great question, right? So I think that as I showed in the AI opportunity tree, it definitely makes sense to first gain momentum with some quick wins and low-hanging fruits, right? And then you can start mixing it up with longer-term bets, so more strategic opportunities and so on. Because at the beginning, you really, there is a lot of like resistance and hesitation when it comes to AI, right? And you will have all those blockers also from compliance, from some people who maybe don't want to automate things and so on. So you really need to get off the ground with some quick initiatives, and then, yeah, and then you can basically start strategizing. And also at the beginning, so we sometimes see big companies that kind of try to create an AI strategy first before they actually start doing something. I wouldn't advise to do that, right? Because at the beginning, you just don't have all the knowledge that you need to formulate a realistic and winning AI strategy. So really start learning, and then over time, you can figure it out.
Okay, I'm going to interject here, Tautiv. I'm sure we have a few more questions, but due to time, I want to move to the next section. We just have a couple of minutes left. So I want to thank everybody for your great questions. If we did not get to your question here, feel free to send your question to myself or Dr. Jana, and we'll be happy to get back to you. It's always energizing to hear what's on your minds. But before we wrap up, I do want to share a quick look at what's coming up here next at PMA. So our next live learning event will be on September 25th, Understanding AI in Recruitment, What Job Seekers Need to Know. The hiring landscape is rapidly changing, and AI is now the central to how employers are finding, screening, and selecting candidates. So in this session, we will have an expert here on this, and she'll break down the technologies recruiters are using today and how they shape their hiring decisions and what job seekers can do to stay competitive. We'll also highlight AI-powered tools that are available to candidates to help them navigate the modern job search with more confidence and more success. PMA, this relates to PMA. We've integrated with one of the more powerful resume optimization tools on the market. So this will be a very strong session for anyone who is between jobs or they're prepping their resume for something that's upcoming. So tune into that, and you could monitor my LinkedIn or the PMA community. If you're a member, if you're not a member, join, and we have an event calendar. You could stay posted on that. In closing, I would just like to express to you, Jana, I want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. For everyone here, this is exactly the kind of conversation that we build every day inside the PMA community, where we focus on connecting product professionals with resources and coaching and a community of peers dedicated to helping you grow. I also encourage you to check out Dr. Jana's book, The Art of AI Product Development. It's full of practical wisdom you can put into practice right away. And finally, I thank you all for joining us. If you're not already a member, consider checking out PMA. It's always free to join, and it's where you can stay tuned in for details on all of our upcoming live learning events. Until then, please take care and keep building products that make an impact. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and thank you, Ross, again.
Thank you, Dr. Jana.